Hope you enjoy Harry Potter fanfic. Sirius slumped in a chair at the long table in the semi-clean kitchen at 12 Grimmauld Place. By semi-clean he meant that the surfaces were wiped, but the walls were grimy, and the floor was warped and increased with dirt. His lips curled and his nose wrinkled as he looked around. He was never supposed to step foot in this house again, not after he had left at the tender age of 16. However, there was a war going on, again, and he was doing the only thing he could to help. He had little choice but to hide here, since he was a wanted criminal, who that idiot Minister Fudge used as a scapegoat for everything that went wrong in the wizarding world. Some of the things he was accused of doing would have been fun too. He always wanted to stop up the bathrooms in the ministry. However, he hadn't done anything other than hide since his godson and friend had rescued him just over a year ago. He shuddered as he remembered that he had been minutes away from being kissed by Dementors. He still had nightmares about that and Azkaban. When Harry had seen the Dark Lord reborn a few months before, Dumbledore had restarted the group of freedom fighters from the last time that megalomaniac had walked the earth. They were called the Order of the Phoenix, and now they had taken over his house. He had offered it for meetings, but they took that to mean a safe house. The Weasleys and Hermione had moved in once the Fidelius charm was put in place, for their own protection. According to Dumbledore, they were too close to Harry to be safe elsewhere. Sirius had no idea how the adult Grangers were taking that. They were probably in just as much danger as their daughter, yet Hermione seemed to be the only one that cared about them. The Order appeared suddenly one day and retrieved her from her home. They left the parents behind, helpless. He didn't think that was right, but since he was being held here, there was only letters to be written, and write them he tried. Yet they never left the house. Someone always made sure they were destroyed. He thought he might get out to the Muggle world and try to call them, or sneak Hermione to do so. She had to be worried about them too. While he couldn't bring them here, they could flee the country. It was something he was going to have to think about. But right now, he had to worry about these people taking over his house. Sirius wasn't sure what the Order did, other than make his life miserable. They didn't go out and proactively take down Death Eaters, like they had in the past. The only thing he'd seen them do so far was watch Harry and guard the prophecy room in the Department of Mysteries. How that was supposed to stop Voldemort, he didn't know. But still, he wasn't doing any of those things either. No, he was sitting around his childhood home moping. Harry, thankfully, was supposed to be here in a few weeks. According to Dumbledore, by then he would have spent enough time at Privet Drive to keep the Blood Ward stable for another year. Sirius knew his godson hated it at that house. He wanted to write to him and tell him where he was, but Dumbledore, in all his infinite wisdom, said that Harry needed time to process what had happened to him. Alone. Without support. Even so, Sirius had tried to write to him multiple times, like he had the Grangers, but all his letters had been confiscated. He was beginning to get annoyed. This he could handle, sort of. What he couldn't handle was the way that red-haired harpy was taking over his house. He may not have liked the building, but it was still his, and Mrs. Weasley had no right taking over the way she was. It was the only thing he owned, damn it. He hated this stupid, gloomy, dark house, but he hated that he had to put up with her company more. It wasn't that he had people around, it was what they were doing. They took over every aspect of his life, who he talked to, where he went, even what was going to be kept and what was to be thrown away. In this old house, was a house elf named Creacker. Sirius and Creacker detested each other. Sirius hated that house elf almost as much as he hated Snivellus. Creacker had spent many years here alone, and he had only gone crazier than before. Sirius had tried to get him to clean, but Molly informed him that she would be taking over that duty, along with her children and Hermione. She told him that he was an unkind man to make that poor old elf do the housework. He really hated that condescending voice of hers. He already had a mother he disliked, he didn't need another. She was only a few years older than he was for Merlin's sake. Sirius, on the other hand, knew that if house elves weren't given work, their mind would snap completely. That was why this house was such a mess. That blasted portrait of his mother had kept Kreaker from doing his duty. It was shameful, and now he needed to do something to gain back control over his house and house elf. He rose from the table and made his way to the library. It was the only room in the house that no one else had access to, much to Dumbledore's displeasure. He had just had an argument with Molly as to where Harry would be sleeping when he got here. She insisted that Harry should sleep with Ron because he needed to be around his friends. Yeah, then he'll need his friends, the dogman thought with a grimace. What about earlier this summer? He really could have used someone then. Stupid headmaster, and his stupid games. I wonder just what that old barmy man is up to. Sirius knew that Harry would be angry about the lack of communication and that he would probably want a room he could go to so he would have a place to unwind. He wouldn't be able to do that if he were bunking with Ron. Regulus's room was vacant and there were plenty of other rooms that no one was using. This house had 3 floors of bedrooms. To pair up the kids was ridiculous. These were teenagers, after all, and they would want their space. Well, maybe not the twins. He marched to the back of the library, to a room that was hidden there. This room was the reason only a black could come into the library, unless allowed. It was a ritual room that only the family could use. Many dark rituals had taken place here, and he had avoided it like the plague. The room itself was harmless, but the things that had gone on in here had left a taint that made his skin crawl. If he could figure out another way to help his godson, and himself, he wouldn't step foot in here now, but needs must. The room itself was circular, with grey marble walls. It had a large black marble pedestal in the middle that blended with the grey marble floor. The few torches along the walls did little to lighten it. There was a diagram in the center of the floor that was etched into the stone. It was a round circle with runes carved along the outside. The pedestal was smack dab in the middle of the circle. It was used to call on demons for knowledge, among other things. On those grey walls was deep red dried blood from former things done here, that Sirius didn't want to think about. He loathed the dark arts that his family loved. He never wanted to be the head of house, but if he wanted to protect Harry, and get himself free, he needed the additional power. He entered the room and shuddered, the whole place creeped him out. Still, he needed to do this, so he went to the pedestal. Slamming down his hand on the small silver spike in the middle of the plinth, he felt the prick that drew blood. The circle changed color as his blood flowed down the inscriptions. The room lit red as magic heeded his call. The smell the copper was strong. He could feel where the needle still impaled his hand, wanting to remove it, but it was still needed there. Taking a deep breath and he said, I, Sirius Orion Black, hereby claim the head of house for the House of Black. Let it be known from this day forth all blacks will answer to me. Feeling magic wrap around him, judging him, he took another deep breath and waited. His core soon felt the tug of magic, like strings on a wind chime. I hereby recall all who were cast out to be reinstated, and that they will know the power of the House of Black again, he said, knowing that if the family was to survive he would need those people. Any black that kneels to one other than the head of house is henceforth an oath breaker. All rights, privileges, and monies will be claimed as forfeit. As is my right, I hereby claim the forfeit of all oath breakers. May their magic be stripped and distributed to each black that stayed true to themselves by my own discretion. He felt the magic flow into the pedestal and start to fill him, the red light surrounded his body and then it burst out of him and dispersed into the air, feeling, searching and fulfilling his command. He could feel Andromeda, Tonks, and Harry through the magic, and they were getting stronger. He knew Andromeda and Tonks would know what that meant. Poor Harry would more than likely be scared. The only reason the boy was getting black magic was because of the Godfather oath that Sirius swore when the child was born. Because the Potters died, Sirius was now his guardian, therefore, magic saw him as Sirius' heir. Harry was distantly related to his second cousin twice removed, via marriage, but he didn't hold black blood. Sirius thought of changing that, but it would be up to Harry. Putting aside that wonderful thought, the new head of house wondered how Bellatrix was doing. He could feel the magic leave her, making her a squib. Would she take her own life now? He didn't care. That crazy bitch needed to be put down like the rabid bitch she was. He did like the fact that all her vaults would now be his and no one could enter until he went to Gringotts and claimed them completely. That blight on his family would be gone, finally. He relished the power for a moment, then turned his thoughts back to the others. Narcissa was getting a small portion of the magic, as was Draco. It was at his discretion, after all. He did wonder what would happen should they take the dark mark, and then brushed those thoughts aside. Some of the more distant cousins, including the Weasleys, not Molly, were getting minute increases as well. It was such a tiny bit, they probably wouldn't even feel it. I hereby claim this house to be mine, he uttered steadfastly. No one will rule but me. It is my duty and privilege to command that it serve me as its master. All wards will strengthen and listen only to me. All charms placed on this house are mine to command. Any with ill intent upon the House of Black will henceforth be denied access. He needed to have the control of the wards so that no one would be able to order him around in his house. The wards flared, and he knew that Snivellis would no longer be allowed in the house. Neither would the thief, Mundungus. That was too bad. Sirius actually liked him. Maybe if he could get him to take a vow to keep his sticky fingers to himself. Bringing himself back to the task at hand, he felt the Fidelius was now his and he was the secret keeper. Dumbledore would not be happy, but he didn't care what that old man thought right now. Trying to keep Harry and him prisoners didn't make Sirius like him all that much. Oh, he respected him and would listen to him about some things, but he didn't like him. Sirius was tickled that the wards stung Molly but didn't evict her. She had no ill intent, she was just being her overbearing self. She would find, however, that every time she so much as thought Sirius was wrong, she would get pricked again. It was petty, he knew, but it felt good at the same time. However, if she escalated her demands, then the wards might just throw her out, without warning. Sirius hoped not. He liked the rest of her family, though he really didn't trust them totally. Ron was a bit of a jealous boy. Ginny was always going on about how Harry was the only boy for her. And the twins, while good kids, did tend to be sneaky enough to try and gain knowledge he preferred they left alone. Hermione was a bit bossy, but she did look up to most adults and was mollified when told she couldn't do something. As long as it wasn't Sirius who told her. While she did listen to him, it was reluctantly. He stopped his mind from drifting again, Azkaban really did a number on his concentration, and he needed to finish what he started. All servants of the House of Black are called to me this very minute to retake their vows of obedience, that they may be strong and serve the House of Black to their fullest. He said in a demanding voice, his hand still on the pedestal, though the bleeding stopped, it was still taking his magic. Kreaker popped into the room, looking as if he had fought the magic the entire way. Blood Trader Master calls poor old Kriaker. Kriaker is not wanting to serve this master, but Kriaker must be obeying the call of magic, the wretched creature spoke. His long crooked nose almost touching the floor as he bowed to the man he despised. Sirius ignored him and finished the ritual. Everything I have spoken will remain until I say otherwise, or the next black is called. So mote it be. With great relief he took his injured hand off the pedestal. He watched as the wound healed. It was then he noted the house ring on his right hand. He was tired, that took a lot out of him, but he felt his magic start to come back, so he turned to the house elf groveling on the floor. In a way he felt pity for the wretched creature. The house elf had lived his whole life to serve the House of Black. Now, that same devotion was being used to make him serve a master he hated. Kriaker, you have one choice, he said firmly, making the elf look up at him. You will serve, or you will die. Your head will not go on the wall, and you will not be remembered as a devoted servant. You will die here in this room, and your body will be banished. Decide, he ordered, his tone full of power, demanding to be obeyed. Kriaker was in a quandary. He lived to serve the House of Black, but he reviled this man in front of him with a burning passion. He needed to complete the task set to him by Master Regulus he was ordered to, and Kriaker did not want to disobey the last order of his beloved master. Shaking his head back and forth with indecision, he felt his mind nearly snap. He had been too long by himself and, though he wasn't free, he had not served in years. Would he feel better doing what he was supposed to do and serve the House of Black like he had in times past? Was it possible to serve the Blood Trader? 2 minutes passed and neither of the occupants of the room moved from their spot. The house elf's only movement was the head shaking. Kriaker finally looked up and said, Kriaker will serve the House of Black again. Kriaker lives to serve. He once more bowed and his voice was much more stable. Then I hereby claim the house elf Kriaker to be loyal to the House of Black until the day he dies. May he live on the magic of the house he serves, Sirius incanted, putting his hand on the dirty elf's head. There was a blue glow around both of them and then Sirius stood back. Kriaker was renewed. Though he was still old and didn't change much on the outside, his magic got a boost from the wards, and he felt invigorated. He was no longer as stooped, and his wrinkles lessened. Kriaker, you will clean this house, Sirius said, this time softly. He knew what it took for the old elf to make this decision, so he'd meet Kriaker halfway. Start with the rooms that are used the most and clean a room for my godson. Regulus's room will be best. Take all of Regulus's things and store them in the attic. Yes, master, Kriaker said as he stood. Then start taking all the dark objects and put them in a chest, put it in my room, the master added as an afterthought. And I mean all the dark objects. You will not hide anything. You are my elf now, and you will obey me to the fullest, Sirius ordered. He would send it all to the Department of Mysteries and they could deal with them. He didn't think it was safe to just throw them away, who knew what innocent person could pick them out of the bins. Kriaker hears and obeys. With that, the transformed elf popped out of the room. Still standing in the room of power, he started thinking on what he could do to help this war effort. Stripping Bellatrix of her magic and money was a good start, but what else could he do? He wanted Andromeda and her husband to come and stay here for protection, no matter who protested. He'd asked Tonks to give Andromeda a message with the secret so that she could come if she wanted. Narcissa could take care of herself. He made his way down the stairs and could already see the efforts that the elves were making. The walls were brighter, the brass oil lamps glimmered, and there were no cobwebs in the corners. The pictures were cleaner, and he could now see who was in them. The wallpaper was washed and looked like it needed to be replaced. He wandered further down the hall and soon came across his mother's painting. Its now clean curtains were open, and she was looking down the scrubbed hall with distaste. The look on her face made it seem that she was not happy with the new elves. Probably because they didn't listen to her. Not even her Kriaker. "Hello, mother," he sneered at the crazed woman, who had just opened her mouth to start screeching. Disappointment, she sneered back, hate in her painted eyes. "I've come to tell you, I've reclaimed the House of Black and now I will finally see you off this wall. Don't worry, I'm not going to destroy you, I'm going to put you in your old room, lock you in the portrait frame and visit you often to tell you how the house is doing," he said with a smirk. Loving the confused and angry look on her face. "The only entertainment you will have is the hippogriff. Have fun," he laughed, it would do her good to be locked up in that room with only Buckbeak for company. He really needed to find a way to free the poor beast. "I disowned you, you little bastard," she whispered disbelievingly. "You can't be the head of the house." "I won't allow it," she finished, almost at a yell. "I hate to tell you this, mother, but you're dead. You have no power. Kriaker is mine now and will no longer follow your orders." The joy he felt when she looked at him in horror was petty at best, but long had he wanted to put her in her place. Now, he would finally get his revenge for the horrible childhood she had given him. "Kriaker," he called. "Master has called Kriaker," the old elf asked, once more bowing deeply. His pillowcase was clean and had the family emblem on it as well. "Yes, I did. I want this painting removed. If you feel it would be too painful for you to do it, then have one of the other elves do it. Have her put in her old room, make sure she can't leave. I want her kept there and undisturbed. Don't talk to her, that's an order, Kriaker," he stated gruffly. "Yes, master," the old elf replied, doing his best not to look at Walburga. It was hard, she had been his only company for many years. Crazy though she is, he still felt the pull to listen to her. "Also, I want the elf heads moved to her room as well." "They would be more honored there," Sirius ordered more gently. He knew it would be hard on Kriaker, and if he didn't want the elf to turn on him, he'd give him the option. "Roper," Kriaker called. "Roper is being needed," the youngish elf asked as he popped in. "Master is wanting this painting removed. It is to be placed, with the elf heads, in the master bedroom." "Make sure it is not being leaving that room," Kriaker said in a strained voice. "Roper will be doing this right now," the young elf said, snapping his fingers and popping away with them. Sirius turned to Kriaker and knelt down to look in his eyes. "Kriaker, I know that was hard on you, and I am sorry I had to do that, but it is for your own good. She was not kind to you. You must understand that. Master is too kind to Kriaker." And with a snap of his fingers, he popped away. Sirius stood and continued his trek down the stairs and into the kitchen. He sat at the table and looked around. Elves were fast workers, he hadn't seen the kitchen so clean since he was a lad. Molly was sitting at the table, fuming. She looked at Sirius and exploded, flinching from the stinging she was getting from the wards. "Sirius Black, just what is going on around here? Some strange elf came into the kitchen and informs me that I was no longer needed. She forced me to leave. How dare you bring elves here? Dumbledore won't like it. You have no right to put the order at risk," she yelled at him from across the table. Sirius sat calmly and let her yell. "No right? No right? This is my house. If I want to bond with elves to get it clean, that is my right," he stated, cocking his head to the side and looked at her like she was an ignorant kid. "You are putting the children at risk. You don't know the loyalty of those elves? What if they go back to their old family as a spy? Molly screamed, and then winced as the wards gave her an extra hard sting as a warning. What are you talking about? Elves can't betray their masters, he said, looking at her as if she was speaking Greek. You will send those elves away. Give them clothes and get rid of them, she demanded, standing and putting her fist on her hips, flinching when the ward stung her. Molly, I am not your child. This is not your house. You are here, only because the headmaster needs you here, and at my reluctant invitation. You cannot order me around as if this was your home. How would you feel if I came to your house and started demanding that you and your family to bond with elves and dirty up your house, because I didn't feel comfortable there? Sirius said calmly, yet firmly, to the mother of the Weasley family. Why would anyone do that? That doesn't make sense at all and is completely beside the point. Those elves could be spies, and I won't have it, Molly said, confused and angry. You just wait until Dumbledore gets here. He will set you right, she threatened him, slumping down in her chair as if that settled it, and got stung again, only this time harder. She all but jumped out of her chair again. Now Sirius was getting annoyed. You won't have it? You won't have it, he spat, his voice rising. How dare you threaten me in my own house, he hissed as his hands balled up into fists. He held back on the need to slam them. Instead he placed them on the table and leaned into her space. She tilted away from the man she just angered, confusion showing on her face, as if he didn't react as predicted. I can kick the lot of you out in a minute, and you would have to fend for yourselves. I can remove you and keep your children and husband here, where they would be safe. It is a good thing for you I am not a vindictive man, he threatened in a harsh whisper, giving in and slamming his fists on the table. But by Merlin, woman, you will follow the rules of this house, he finally gave in his need to yell. Molly huffed and folded her arms across her chest, a look of disbelief on her face. You will keep your tongue, or I will ban you to your room, Sirius continued as he leaned forward more to make sure she understood what he was saying. He looked her straight in the eyes and narrowed his dangerously. Then I will only let you out for meals and the loo. Maybe then you will know how Harry feels. But you don't care about that, do you? He snarled. She looked at him with wide eyes, like a skeleton in her closet had just been revealed. Oh yes, I know all about how the twins and Ron had to rescue Harry. But you didn't believe them, did you? You took Dumbledore's word that all was well, even with the bars they pulled off his window still attached to the car, he said, his face contorting to show she was pushing him to his limit. I could further this by locking you in a closet, and only letting you out to cook meals. You don't hold the high ground here, Molly. She glared at him and opened her mouth to yell, but he cut her off. Listen to me, Molly Weasley, I have had enough of your nagging, and bossing everyone around. You will leave Harry alone and he will sleep where I say he will. I may not be able to do much for the order, but I will be in command of this house, he said, again slamming his fists on the table again, making the teacups rattle. She opened her mouth again, and was getting red in the face, though from embarrassment or anger, Sirius didn't care. No. I'm talking and you will sit there and shut the hell up. Do you feel the wards stinging you? They are teaching you manners. For all the harping you do on the children about manners, you seem to have very few. It will just keep getting worse the more you argue with me, then the house will evict you. Do you want that? Molly snorted, but otherwise remained quiet. The last few times she spoke she had gotten stung enough to welt. At the moment, Fred, George, Ron, Ginny, and Hermione came running into the room to see who was yelling. It was comical the way they fell on top of one another trying to be first through the door. Sit down everyone, Sirius said, gesturing to the chairs around the table. The kids saw Molly sitting at the table, still fuming, and looked around with various expressions on their faces, mostly confusion. They all took seats and looked back and forth between the two adults. Sirius saw their looks of trepidation and tried to ease the tense atmosphere. I want to let you know that you will no longer have to clean this house. He smiled, taking the bite out of what he still had to say. The teens looked relieved, some slumping in their chairs, and others giving a small cheer. This was not an easy house to clean, and all of them had been hurt by the creatures that inhabited the place. Though, Fred and George would have to figure out how to get their ingredients if they couldn't sneak them by cleaning. Things are going to be different around here, kids, the new head said, sitting back in his chair and relaxing. His legs stretched forward and crossed at the ankles. His arms casually rested on his stomach, fingers laced. How? Came the question from Hermione. Well, first off, there are now 7 house elves cleaning the house. Stop, he said, holding his hand up at Hermione as she opened her mouth to tell him off. If you start yelling at me, the house will sting you. If you continue, after so many warnings, you will be evicted. I don't want that to happen. But she started, only to stop when he glared at her. I know what you think about elves. Harry told me. I know that you feel it's slavery, but you do not have any right to impose your false beliefs on me, Sirius stated firmly. And then softened his face and tried to look kindly at the girl who reminded him so much of Lily in her desire to know everything. They're not false, she grumbled, folding her arms across her chest. Yes, they are, came the rebuttal. Hermione, you should research so you will understand the nature of house elves. I asked each and every one of them if they wanted to bond. I did not take any by force. Most broke out in tears, happy to be serving a family again, he said gently to her. But she said again, only to stop with he shook his head. I sent the elf named Dobby to Harry to see if Harry wants to bond with him, the man informed her strongly. It is Dobby's greatest desire to be bonded with Harry. If they do, you will respect that. If you cannot, then keep your opinions to yourself while you are in this house. Hermione quieted with a mulish expression. She didn't want to be attacked by the wards, and she certainly didn't want to be evicted, she had nowhere else to go. When the Order all but kidnapped her, her parents said they were still going out of the country on vacation. She sat, disgruntled. It was not often that she was told she couldn't voice her opinion. Her parents always told her to speak out on what was bothering her. Second off, Mother's portrait has been removed. Lastly, you can all access the library now, so you will have something to do. There are books you cannot read. You won't even be able to take them off the shelf. Also, I will inform the house elves that you will be responsible for your own rooms, he said, trying to lighten the mood. Hermione bounced in her chair but kept silent. The Weasley children were wary, they were expecting their mum to blow at any minute. They could see the redness of her face. She was very angry. Look, Sirius said, running his hand over his face, I don't want to come across as a hard ass. I just want you to understand that this is my house, and you are my guests. I will do everything in my power to make sure you are as comfortable as I can. If you need something, let me know, and I will do what I can to help. However, I will not put up with being treated as a child that broke the rules. Every single one of you knows the hell I've been through these past 14 years. There were guilty faces all around, bar Molly. For some reason, they kept forgetting what Sirius had been through. It was probably because he only showed the carefree side of himself and not the torn man he had become. It has taken its toll, I agree, but I am not a kid that needs to be taken to task. He once more looked at the fuming Mrs. Weasley. You have always been an irresponsible man, she finally snapped, standing so fast her chair clattered behind her. Her body flinched but she ignored the stinging. In all the time I've known you, you have never taken anything seriously. You cause disorder in all the order meetings, always fighting the headmaster and Severus. Dumbledore is a great man, and you should do as he says and not argue with him, Molly argued passionately. Severus has made up for whatever sin you have probably falsely labeled him with. He is very important to the order, yet, all you do is fight with him. You are nothing but an adult child sulking over a lost toy. Molly, he said, looking to her in ire, you didn't know me until a couple of months ago. You only have the word of others that knew me before I was sent to Azkaban. How the hell could you make such an opinion of me? Freedom is not a toy. You should feel lucky that you have yours. The teen's head swiveled back and forth between the two bickering adults, not daring to say a word and interrupt the only entertainment they've had since they got here. If you had taken Harry from that house and never gone after Pettigrew, then you would not have been put in Azkaban. That shows just how irresponsible you are, she said in self-righteousness anger, reaching down and jerking her chair up. When it was righted, she thumped down on it. I did try and take Harry, I was denied. On the orders of the very man you so adore. So, blame him, he spat back, still upset over the fact that his godson had been taken from his arms. Besides, that was 14 years ago. I've been punished for that. Are you telling me that when you were younger you did everything right and nothing you did caused harm to anyone? I find your reasoning stupid to a major degree, Sirius snarled at her, standing up from the table and glaring at her for her audacity. You still haven't changed. I've seen the jokes you make of the order meetings, and I see how you argue with everyone. Now you're being all bossy and commanding at the order headquarters. These are not the signs of a responsible man. Those are the signs of the rebellious teen that everyone claims you are, she rebutted, still smarting that the wards were finding her truth to be offensive enough to keep stinging her. She was going to talk to Dumbledore about this. Maybe he could do something about Black. Molly, he paused and gritted his teeth, looking at the teens watching them, and then continued, I am a prisoner here, and I can do nothing but offer my house as refuge. If I think something I say will help the war effort, then I am going to say it. Dumbledore is not a god. He can be wrong, and if no one tells him so, he will continue not to seek our opinions and only demand servitude. Dumbledore is a great wizard, and I respect him, but, like you, he treats me and hell everyone else like children. We are adults and entitled to voice our different opinions, without being sent to our rooms like bad little tykes. If you didn't act like one, no one would treat you like one, she snarled back and then jumped when the wards got her extra hard. He flexed his head to the side to relieve some of the stress in his shoulders, trying to calm down before the wards kicked everyone out. I will remind Dumbledore, like I did you, that this is my house, and I will be treated with respect. You can think on that. Talk to your husband, maybe he can get it through that thick head of yours that you are not in charge. And with that, he left the room before he did something foolish. Finally reaching his room, he sighed and relaxed. It had been a trying day, and it was not over yet. He still needed to confront Dumbledore, and he needed to speak to Harry. The poor boy was probably going crazy with all the magic forced onto him, not to mention the crazy house elf that wanted to bond with him. That gave him an idea. Quickly he sat and wrote to his godson all that he had done that day and what to expect in the future. When he finished, he called Winky. Winky, he said when she popped in, can you feel where Dobby is? Winky is knowing where Dobby is, she answered. Take this letter to him and have him give it to Harry Potter, he requested kindly. Winky will be doing this right away, she said, taking the letter and popping away. Sirius sighed, finally he would be able to do something productive. Maybe, just maybe, it will help. Only time will tell. Meanwhile, Harry Potter was having a bizarre day. He had been sitting in his room pouting over the lack of communication with his friends and Sirius. It reminded him far too much of his first summer after his first year at Hogwarts. Only this time he got the letters, they just didn't say anything. He was being left completely in the dark. While he was moping, Dobby popped in and asked to bond with him. Which he thought was weird. He always thought Dobby wanted to be free. The little guy always seemed so happy. But here he was about 20 minutes later, watching Dobby bounce excitedly around the room fixing things and cleaning. Aunt Petunia was going to have kittens. He couldn't wait. Dobby, are you sure this is what you want? He asked for the 10th time. Dobby is being sure, Harry Potter, sir, the elf answered patiently. Okay, Harry said resigned. He just knew Hermione was going to kill him. A loud pop was heard and Winky appeared. Dobby, she squeaked, I is being having a letter for Harry Potter. I'm Harry Potter, the teen said, looking at the female elf, trying to place her. She looked familiar, but he just couldn't put his finger on it. Oh, Harry Potter, sir, I is being having a letter from your godfather, she said, holding out the note. Thanks, Winky Harry replied, taking the missive and opening it. His face broke out in a radiant smile as he read the words of his godfather. Sirius stated that he had been trying to write all summer, and that the people in his house had been taking and destroying his letters. The man explained what he had done that day, and what he planned to do in the near future. It was all a vague outline, but Harry couldn't wait to see the outcome. Harry did fume a bit about how Sirius was being treated. He always thought Mrs. Weasley to be a kind woman. A bit bossy, yeah, but motherly. The way Sirius was describing her, she sounded downright mean. A bit like Aunt Petunia, only not as indulging to her children as his aunt was with Dudley. He knew from talking to the Weasley children that Mrs. Weasley didn't put up with shenanigans. His aunt on the other hand let Dudley get away with murder. Still, after reading this, he was unsure of how much the Weasley kids had left out. Maybe, she did more than yell. He couldn't believe what he was reading. Even he knew that you behaved in other people's houses. The Dursleys were the epitome of manners when they were in other people's company. Not so much when it was just family, but bring in outsiders, and they were nothing but poise and grace. Or so they liked to think. Still, if Mrs. Weasley was being mean to Sirius like that, after all the man had suffered, maybe he would have to rethink his opinion of her. He was also upset that this Order of the Phoenix was taking letters that were meant for him, and if Sirius was right, the Drs. Granger. That was post-tampering, and he was pretty sure it was illegal here in the UK. He did have to wonder if this was also against the law in the wizarding world. Something to look up. He moved to his desk and started writing a letter back. He made sure to pour all his frustrations out, just like Sirius did. Now that they had house elves to ferry the notes, there was no reason not to keep in touch. He did ponder for a moment on whether or not to write his friends, but decided not to, right yet. After all, Sirius wrote that they were following the orders of the headmaster. He could forgive them, maybe, but for now, he'd let them sweat. HP. Later that night Dumbledore came to Grimmauld Place. It took him a minute to get through the wards, like he was being judged and found wanting, but not outright immoral. He shuddered at the thought that these wards found him less than pure. He had no idea why they would not think him as leader of the light. He did everything he did for the greater good of all, even if it towed the line of grey magic sometimes. How could he be deemed anything but pure? Besides, they were on a house that full of dark magic, their judgment was skewed, he was sure. The old man shrugged it off as something only a dark family would feel and went into the house. He may not be the secret keeper anymore, and wasn't that a shocker, but all that had been told the secret still knew where the house was. He did wonder how Sirius had wrestled the charm away from him. He hoped the man was not delving in his family's magic. No good would come of that. He stopped in the kitchen and noted everyone, but Sirius was there. "Molly, my dear, perchance do you know where Sirius is?" he asked the fuming woman. She had flued him earlier and ranted at him for an hour after Sirius had his little talk. It had taken quite a while to calm her down and let her know that he would handle it. He was just glad that he had been able to. Sometimes, when Molly got on a rant, nothing would help. She was really loyal to him though, so he did his best to accomplish his task on calming her down. It worked, eventually. "He's in the study at the end of the hall. Probably, thinking of more ways to punish me," she said, grumbling under her breath, snatching some of Arthur's socks to darn. She pushed the needle in so hard that it almost flew out the other side. Since she was no longer allowed to cook, she had to do something with her hands, but she was not getting far in her task, since she was not paying attention, too busy fuming over Sirius. So her seams would come out crooked, and she would have to restitch every other poke or so. Oh yeah, she was angry. "Thank you, Molly. I will endeavor to make him return the wards to me. I am sure that he is merely venting some frustration on his lack of use for the order." "Don't trouble yourself any further," he said, his eyes twinkling like they always did when he felt he was right. Molly gave a curt nod and went back to her sewing. The kids started whispering about what might be said between Sirius and Albus, until Molly glared them into silence. Albus, with his colorful and tacky robes of orange and green, followed Molly's directions and soon came to his destination. He flowed into the room Sirius was in and settled on a chair. He smoothed out his long white beard, so it sat perfectly down his front. Then he laced his fingers across his stomach, like he was the old grandfather he pretended to be. Since he never had children, the man really didn't understand what a grandfather was, though he liked to think he did. He then looked expectantly at Sirius, like the man was a toddler caught stealing biscuits, and that with just that look alone, he should confess. Sirius snorted at the way the man acted. He picked up his glass, raised it in salute at the old man and drank. Putting the glass down, he nodded. "Dumbledore," he said curtly. "Sirius," the man replied, running his hand down his beard. "Can you tell me why you have relieved me of being the secret keeper for this house?" he asked, looking perplexed. Like he didn't understand why the man in front of him would not think him worthy of holding the wards. "Sure," the dogman said with a shrug. "It's my house. Only I should be able to invite people to come to it." He said it with such an air that one would think he was talking to a child who should have known the answer. He inwardly smirked at the look of shock on the old man's face. "Whatever do you mean?" "No one is here that I do not approve of," Albus said, furrowing his brow as if trying to work a difficult puzzle. "Yes, you approve of," Sirius said, sipping his brandy, then twirling the liquid around in the glass, watching the amber liquid make small waves. It was a bit calming to him. He then pulled his gaze away and gave a firm look to the old man sitting across from him. "Look, I offered this house as a meeting place, not a safe house. You moved people in without my consent or even asking me. You just showed up with them and said they were staying. I'm a bit peeved about that, he answered with a bite in his tone. Surely you could see that they needed, the old man started, only to be interrupted. He didn't even acknowledge the fact that the younger man was angry, only that he wasn't doing what Dumbledore thought he should be. This was uncharted territory for him. Everyone listened to him. Well, not the likes of Malfoy, but those on the light side of magic did. That's not the bloody point. You didn't ask, Sirius snapped, making Albus' head snap up a bit, as if startling him from his thought. Sirius showed just how mad he was by slamming his glass on the table, making the brandy spill everywhere. Come now. No. Albus, get it through your head you are not Merlin, or any deity known to wizards. It is common courtesy to ask a person if he minded having house guests. By bringing everyone here, you denied my right to veto who could stay. Since she arrived, I've had to listen to that harpy go on and on about what a horrible person I am, Sirius seethed, gritting his teeth, and then taking a deep breath to try and calm down. He needed to stay rational right now. Dumbledore was a master manipulator. If he let his anger control him, he would fall for some subtle influence, and that was the last thing he wanted. There was no way he was going to let Albus guilt trip him into giving up control. Now, Sirius, there is no need to be so upset. I was merely making sure that your godson's friends were safe, the old man placated with a calming gesture of his hands, ignoring the accusations. It behooves you, as Harry's godfather, to protect the people he cares about. Don't pull that with me. These people are not my responsibility, Sirius stated firmly with a sharp slash of his hand. Then he took another breath and changed the subject. And what of Harry, why is he not here, he demanded. Harry is safe where he is. There is no place safer for him than his aunt's house, Dumbledore answered in his best grandfather voice. Will you return the wards to me? The old man changed the subject back to the original content. Sirius scoffed, no. Why ever not? Read my lips, Albus, this is not your house. I need to be able to invite others in. What if someone joins the order that you don't know? Albus inquired a bit forcefully, as if trying to get his way but showing how powerful he was. Then you are out of luck until you introduce them, aren't you? Came the bland reply. Sirius, my boy, you are being unreasonable, Dumbledore said, looking over his half-moon glasses as if chastising an unruly child. See, that right there is why you do not have control of this house, the younger man said, pointing an accusing finger at the elder. It is the main reason I took the wards from your control. You seem to think that you must oversee everything, and that anyone who defies you in just being a child. I am not a child, Albus. I am a grown man that you have trapped in this house. Bound by duty and circumstance. Dumbledore sighed, and stroked his beard. He looked at the man in front of him and seemed to be working out a puzzle. Then he shook his head and changed the subject. Did you really have to threaten Molly? All she has to do is respect that this is my house and that I am a grown man, just like you, and no harm will come to her. It is not my fault she's pig-headed, he said, once again shrugging his shoulder. He leaned back into his chair and picked up his half-empty glass, once more swirling the alcohol. I will speak with her, Dumbledore promised with a small smile. Sirius just snorted. Severus tells me he cannot enter. Albus went on. Did you remove him from the wards maliciously? I thought better of you, young man, he reprimanded, once again as if Sirius was his student. He jerked a bit when the wards warned him with a small shock. He looked at the man across from him again in a chastising way. Was that necessary? He asked. Don't speak to me like that, damn it. Then the wards won't shock you, the dogman snarled as he leaned forward angrily. I didn't kick Snivelis out, the wards are what is stopping him. He must have ill intent towards me or someone in the house. Mundungus can't come in either. It is their own ill intent keeping them at bay, yet here you are reprimanding me for wanting people out of my house that want to hurt me. What is your game, Albus? He asked, eyes narrowed. He rested back into his chair, keeping a sharp eye on the headmaster's face, waiting for the demands to start. I assure you, my boy, I am not playing games, the old man assured him. Then his eyes lost their twinkle. You need to let them in, Sirius, I need them in the order. I cannot do without Severus. He must be able to attend, the demands came. Then tell him to quit acting like a spoiled child and wanting my death over something that happened years ago. I have paid for my crimes. Tell your pet Death Eater to get over it already. And when he tells you I tried to kill him, you can remind the slimy bastard that he knew exactly what was under the willow and no one made him go there. Sirius said as he rose from his chair and headed for the door. Now, Sirius, I was there, I know you wanted to harm poor Severus, Albus stated, looking over his half-moon glasses. Then you should have expelled me. You didn't, so therefore I can only conclude that you didn't then, so that you can try to guilt me now. That must have been your plan all along. Keep something over my head for when you needed to control me. Well, it's not going to work. I have zero guilt over what happened then. Like I said, no one made him go after a werewolf, Sirius said, standing up and heading for the door. I'm done talking to you until you can treat me like an adult. And with that he left the old man to mull over what they talked about. Albus sat in that chair for a very long time. He fretted over the fact that one of his order members was not doing what was needed for the full function of the order. He needed to be the one in charge. It was his vigilante group. He was the leader. If he lost control of Sirius, others might follow. After sitting in thought for a long while, he finally sighed, lavered himself up and left the house. This was going to take more than he could plan in one night. HP. Sirius and Harry wrote every day, via the elves. Harry informed him that he did bond with Dobby and that he was happy that Sirius took the initiative to write. The boy's letters were long and rambling. He was letting out all his frustrations and fears. Sirius would read them all and then reply what he thought might help his godson. The boy would write that he was still very angry with his friends, and Dumbledore. Sirius didn't blame him. The moment that Harry wrote that the Dementors had come and that Dobby had rescued him and Dudley by popping them home, Sirius left the house to go and get his godson. He didn't wait to ask Dumbledore. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He just left. He went straight up to the attic and tried to think of a place to apparate. He remembered, when he was Padfoot, an alley near where he saw Harry catch the night bus. With that thought in mind, he disappeared. Sneaking to number 4 Privet Dr in the middle of the night was exhilarating. It had been too long that he had been cooped up in Grimmauld Place and it was fun to be out doing something. He found Harry's house from the number, since all the houses looked alike, and he climbed the medium-sized tree in the side yard getting up as far up as he could. He looked for the window that looked like it had been barred. Seeing the holes in the walls by the small window on the first floor towards the back of the house, he rapped on the glass with a stick, hoping he had the right room. He didn't know what he'd do if it was Harry's cousin, or worse his uncle. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Harry's unruly hair as the boy stuck his head out of the window. "Sirius," the boy harshly whispered, looking frantically around, like the Aurors would pop up any moment, "what are you doing here? You could get caught." A worried frown etched his face as he took in the sight of his godfather. The man looked better than Harry had ever seen him. His face had filled out and his hair was clean and healthy looking. He was dressed in robes, which Harry thought was out of place, but they were nice robes, and very upper crust looking. "I came to spring you from this joint," his godfather replied, taking in his godson's appearance. Harry didn't look good. He had lines on his face as if he had been stressed out for ages. His unruly hair was lank and stringy. His face was gaunt and pale. Sirius was more determined to get the boy out of this house and help him in any way he could. "Get your stuff and we'll leave here." "No, wait, have Dobby pack it for you, he can bring it later." "Grab only what you value most. It'll be quicker." Harry ducked back into his room and Sirius waited. Soon enough, the boy reappeared, a satchel on his back. "Dobby, hide and wait for my call," he ordered softly towards his room as he flung one leg over the sill. "If the Dursleys see you, just pop away. I'll call you as soon as I can." "Come on. Quickly now," the fugitive said quietly, making a come-along motion. "All right, hold your horses," Harry said as he straddled the window sill. He swung his other leg over and braced himself on the sill. Then he jumped to the tree and made his way to Sirius. "Great job, Harry," the man praised, making Harry blush with pride. Not many people in Harry's young life had praised him. Mostly Hermione, even she didn't do it often. "What now?" the boy asked, forcing the blush away. He didn't want to come off as immature. "Down the tree, and to that alley a few blocks down," his godfather said, pointing to the dark alley a few streets away. "We have to get away from your house. Don't want the Aurors showing up when I disapparate. Come on, quickly now." The two shimmied down the tree and ran off down the street, going over a few blocks to the secluded alley. "I'm going to apparate us to my house. Here, read this, and remember it," Sirius said, giving him a piece of paper with the secret. Harry read the note, with light from the street lamp, and then tried to pocket it, but Sirius shook his head and snatched it away. "I need to hold on to it. If you lose it, anyone can get into my house," he explained, pocketing the slip of paper. "Oh," the teen said, nodding in understanding, but with a confused look on his face. "I'll explain later. Hold on tight," Sirius said, holding out his arm for Harry to grab. "Take a deep breath and hold it, it'll make it easier." Harry took the arm and inhaled deeply, holding it, and nodded his readiness. With a twist, the two were gone. They reappeared again in a dingy room. Harry stumbled a bit and groaned at the turning of his stomach. He shook his head, grabbed his belly and righted his feet. Then he took a good look around. It looked like an attic to Harry. "Where are we?" he asked, noting all the trunks laying around. "My house. Don't touch anything, it might bite. I've had the house elves put all the dark stuff up here, until I can get it the DOM, Sirius explained as he headed for the door, Harry following behind. "They were putting them in my room, but this place is riddled with dark objects, so I made them move it all here. No one is allowed in but family," he added, making Harry puff up at the thought that he was family. "What's the DOM?" the teen asked, gripping onto his satchel. He straightened up at the thought of Sirius considering him family. It had a nice warm feeling. "The Department of Mysteries," came the answer. "They research magic stuff, mostly. I think they even have a room dedicated to the magic of love," he added with a shrug. As Harry walked through the house, he couldn't help but notice how clean it was. The wooden floor shined, and the windows were clear as day, though it was night. The wallpaper was bright and looked brand new. The light fixtures were twinkling in the gas lights. All in all, it was a nice place. He wondered why Sirius hated it so much. He'd live here. They walked a few floors down and were headed to the room that Harry was going to stay in. They were almost there when. "Where have you been, Sirius?" came the shrill voice of Mrs. Weasley. "You know Dumbledore told you not to leave," she snapped at the man. "Oh, hello, Harry dear. I didn't see you there. Why are you here? You should be with your relatives." She tilted her head in inquiry. "Sirius came to get me after Dementors tried to suck the soul out of me," was the indifferent reply. He was still miffed at her for keeping Sirius from writing him. "Oh, don't be silly, dear. Why would there be Dementors in your neighborhood?" "It's Muggle," she scolded with a wave of her hand. "I'm not lying. There were Dementors near my house." "Dudley and I almost died," Harry stated loudly, dropping his satchel on the floor and facing the woman who kept saying he was like family. "Sirius believes me," he added defiantly. "Sirius is just an overgrown child," she snapped, and then jumped when the words stung her again. "Do you see how cruel he is? Making his words punish me for stating fact." The stinging just confirmed to her that Sirius was being childish. The more she received warnings, the more her convictions told her that she was right. "I think you're being rude," the teen said boldly. "It's his house, why are you insulting him?" he asked as if it were obvious. "That's quite enough cheek from you, young man. Since you are here, I will show you where you are sleeping and then you can stay there and think about how rude you just were." She went to grab his satchel, but Harry snatched it up and backed away. "Sirius will take me," he said, standing next to said man, who was glaring for all he was worth. "You are not supposed to be here right now. There were plans to come and get you later. You two just wait until Albus finds out. You're supposed to stay with your relatives, not gallivanting off with your godfather," she said, stepping towards Harry again, but he ducked out of the way and stood behind Sirius. "He's here now, and with my permission. I am his godfather, I do have a say. I'll take him to his room, Molly." "You don't know where it is," Sirius reminded her as he placed a hand on Harry's arm to guide him around the irritating woman. Molly had had enough. This man was undermining everything she said or did. No more, he was going to listen to her, or by Merlin, she was going to act. "Now you listen to me, Sirius Orion Black, Harry will sleep where I tell him to." "He is not your son," she yelled as she stood in their way. "Nor is he yours," was the rebuttal. "You listen to me" was as far as she got, when Sirius rounded on her, the fire in his grey eyes made her step back a few paces. "I'm sorry, who do you think you are speaking to?" he asked, leaning into her space. Then he looked at Harry and just knew the fighting would never stop. He made a decision. "That's it? I've had it. I can handle your griping at me. But I'll be damned if you are going to order Harry around. Get it through you. Never mind, you haven't listened so far, and I'm sure you won't now. Just get out. Until you can behave, get the hell out of my house," the irate man said, calling upon the wards to evict the woman. She started, then the wards picked her up and dragged her through the house, down the stairs and out the door. Her voice was heard screaming all through the house. She was calling for Arthur to come and rescue her. At the same time, she was threatening to tell Dumbledore that Sirius had gone too far. "That has got to be the most stubborn woman I've ever met. And I knew your mother," the tired man sighed as he led Harry to his room. "What just happened?" the teen asked, following his godfather, not sure how to take that bit of information about his mom, but planned to ask later. "I've warned her repeatedly this last week, that she needed to curb her tongue." However, she's just too prideful and stubborn. Don't worry, I'll have Arthur talk to her. Again. Maybe. Though I'm sure that won't help, it hasn't so far, he said while shaking his head. He went further down the hall and then opened the door to Regulus' old room. If he did let her back in, he might just make good his threat to keep her in her room. Damn prideful woman. The room was clean as a whistle, and green. Lots and lots of green. A double bed was positioned in the middle of the far wall. A large dresser was to the right side, and a wardrobe next to it. Both were deep shades of brown, that matched the lighter shade of the brown wall. The bed curtains, rugs, and other hangings were various shades green. All in all, it looked like a forest at night. Reggie was Slytherin. I would have changed the colors, but I figured you might want to pick what you like, Sirius explained, nodding for Harry to put his bag on the bed. It's okay, I kinda like this color. Dobby. Harry called as he put his satchel down. Master is calling Dobby, the little guy asked as he popped in. Yeah, can you get my trunk and other things from the Dursleys? He asked. Dobby can, Dobby stated and then popped away. How come Dobby didn't need to read your paper? Harry asked as he took out his cloak and photo album and placed them on the bed. You're his master, he can go where you are, Sirius explained with a shrug. The only reason he could come earlier, when I was looking for free elves, was because I asked Magic to bring them. Once the ones I didn't choose left, they forgot where here was. Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. This summer, I'm going to get you caught up on everything you should have been taught growing up. All that stuff you need to know about your family and money. Everything. You may not be a lord, but you're pretty high up there. Not to mention, you're my heir, unless I somehow have children out there that I don't know about. I was wondering if you'd like to be adopted by Magic. It would make you related to me. That way if I die, no one could take your inheritance from you, he asked, peering at Harry's face, judging his reaction. Yeah, I think I'd like that. Then maybe Dumbledore won't send me back there, Harry said, smiling at the man who was offering him a good place to live. Sure, he didn't really know him, but the letters they had been sending each other all week made it seem like this man, at least, had his well-being in mind. Yeah, that's great. Sirius said, giving the boy a hug. That way even if I did have bastards out there, you'd still be my heir. That would be weird, commented Harry as he broke away from the hug and tried to arrange his things to hide his embarrassment. Not so much. I was a ladies' man after all, the proud man stated, puffing out his chest. Not something to be proud of, Padfoot, the teen stated with a grimace. To his way of thinking girls were to be worshipped, not used. He could hear Hermione's rant in his head over that statement. Hey, it was all consensual, the man protested. Whatever, Harry said, not wanting to argue. He closed the drawer on the last of his clothes and turned around to look at his godfather. Come on, let's go downstairs and get this over with. Try not to fight with your friends too loudly. I've just got it nice and peaceful here, what with Molly gone, and I don't want to have the wards throw anyone else out because of teenage emotions, Sirius said as he waved towards the door. And started walking out of the room. Fine, but I will let them know what I think of their attitude, Harry said, following behind. You do that, Sirius agreed and the two walked towards what was sure to be a big fight. Just as the two were about to descend the stairs, Creaker popped in and bowed. Master, Creaker is being having a dark object you is needing to see right away, the old house elf said as he held out a large necklace. It was a locket, a man's locket. There was a huge diamond S on the black rectangular front. Its silver chain glimmered in the light of the hall. It was a nice-looking locket, however, the whole thing radiated evil. Like a dark wavy cloud was surrounding it. It couldn't be seen, but it could be felt. "Where did you get this, Creaker?" Sirius asked, pulling Harry back a bit. "Master Regulus is giving it to Creaker." Master Regulus tasked Creaker to destroy it, but Creaker cannot. The elf hung his head. This was his greatest failure. "Reggie ordered you to destroy this." "Why?" Sirius asked, taking the locket but holding it at arm's length. The feeling of dark magic crawled up his arm, making him want to fling the thing away. "The Dark Lord used Creaker to hide the locket. Creaker almost died. Master Regulus had ordered Creaker home. When I obeyed, Master nursed Creaker back to health. Then he ordered Creaker to take him to the Bad Cave. Master Regulus was being very angry at what he found. He drank the vile potion and ordered Creaker to take the locket and destroy it. Creaker cannot. I has been trying," the old elf explained with tears dripping from his large eyes. "What is this thing?" the dogman asked, still scrutinizing the necklace from afar. "It is being a Horcrux," the elf answered, still crying. "Shite," Sirius said, dropping it immediately. His eyes were wide with fear and disgust showed on his face. He backed away until his back hit the wall, his arm still held out in front of him, like he was wishing it was removed, after touching such a vile thing. Harry, now that he wasn't being held back, knelt down and put his hand on the distraught elf's shoulder. "I'm sure you tried your best, Creaker. Sirius will help you now. Won't you, Sirius?" he asked, looking up at his godfather. "Yeah," the older man sighed as he dropped his arm to his side, after shaking the feeling of evil off it. "I know a bit about these evil things. I'm sure I can figure out how to destroy it, but I might need to use it first. There are rituals that will tell if it's the only one. There was a dark lady, somewhere in Romania, about 100 years back or so, who made 3. They almost didn't find out in time. So, I'll take a look and make sure we're not getting rid of the only thing that can help stop the Dark Lord." "How do you know it's Voldemort's?" Harry asked, keeping his eye on the necklace. "Creaker said he had been doing something for the Dark Lord when Reggie found it," the older man explained, shrugging his shoulder. "Oh, yeah, sorry, I was paying more attention to your horrified look." "That thing feels nasty," Harry said, then chuckled at the derogatory names, and he turned back to Creaker. "See, we'll help." The elf's tears dried up and he slowly nodded his head in thanks. Then he glanced at his master, who waved him off, and then the elf popped away. "So, this thing is evil, huh?" "Figures since it's Voldemort's," Harry said, leaning to get a closer look, still knelt down, only to wrinkle his nose at the feel of the thing. "Yeah, don't get too close," the dogman said, pulling on Harry's shirt. "Didn't this boy have an ounce of self-preservation?" "I won't," the boy said, shaking off Sirius' hand, and leaning a bit further forward to get a good look without touching. Weird though, when he got closer his scar hurt, not much, just a twinge. "Sirius, my scar kinda hurts near that thing," he informed the man as he quickly scrambled to his feet and backed away. "Shite," was the only reply as Sirius snatched up the necklace and hurried down the stairs, into a study on the ground floor. If what Harry said was true, then that didn't bode well for what was in the boy's scar. It was something he was going to have to research right away. The last thing he wanted was for his godson to have any connection to that vile man. He surely hoped it was just a connection, and not what he was thinking. Harry hurried after him, worried about what caused the man to panic. What's wrong?" he asked when he reached the study. He watched Sirius frantically look around, then the man's face was overcome with relief as he spotted a metal-looking box. I need to get this thing put away. This iron box will help keep the taint from escaping, Sirius said, closing the box tightly and locking it immediately. He didn't have the key, but that was okay. He'd just burned the whole damn thing with fiend fire. It was one of the only ways he knew to destroy them. Still, he'd hold off until after that ritual. Although, he still had a sneaking suspicion that Harry might be connected. He had no idea if it would, but it might hurt Harry if he just went off and destroyed the thing. He was going to have to do a ton of research and magic to fix this if that were true. That and, he'd have to tell the Order. He wasn't going to be like Dumbledore and keep everything secret. He was sure the old man knew about these evil things, and no one knew. He would keep some things to himself. It wasn't anyone's business what he did with Harry. However, who knew who could help with this? Maybe Mad Eye, or Remus, or even Bill. They'd had to have come across these things before, or at least knew about them. Hell, he'd even ask Snape, if it would help Harry. Just then the residents of the house piled into the room, breaking Sirius from his thoughts. He was just glad the necklace was put up. The kids didn't need to know about it. He'd have to make sure Harry didn't tell his friends. He cut his godson a quick look, all but pleading with his eyes. Harry saw how worried the man was, so he nodded in understanding. He'd get Sirius to tell him what was up later. Sirius, Arthur said as calmly as he could, though the balling of his fist and redness of his face gave his anger away. Why is Molly gone? He asked, taking deep breaths through his nose. To maintain his calmness. Arthur, Sirius said distractedly, his mind focused on the Horcrux situation. He went to the bar and poured himself and Arthur a fire whiskey. He handed the glass to the redhead with a nod, who took it and nodded back. Sorry, I have something on my mind, Sirius said, taking a seat, then turning his attention to Arthur. The other man waved his glass for Sirius to continue, taking a sip and putting it on the table. A bit of steam escaped his nose, but he stayed his attention on Sirius. Arthur, Sirius started, taking a calming breath and gave the other man a small smile. I have warned both of you that the house would retaliate if she didn't curb her attitude. She demanded that I make Harry sleep with Ron. I told her a week ago that he would have his own room. So, since she can't seem to control herself from make demands, even after repeated warnings, the house evicted her. He shrugged the Molly problem off, he put down his glass nonchalantly. And just as causally picked up the box and put it in a wall safe. He waved his wand and locked it down. It would only open for him. Oh, Harry, I didn't see you there. What are you doing here? The redhead asked, looking at the teen that wasn't supposed to be there. I had a run-in with something. Sirius came and got me, the teen said, shrugging his shoulder. Oh, well. Mr. Weasley started, then felt it wasn't his business and turned back to Sirius. Surely you could have had Harry share with Ron. They are best friends, the red-headed man stated diplomatically, putting the whiskey on the table. He was never much of a drinking man. That's not the point, was the polite rebuttal as Sirius picked up his glass and took a sip. After retaking his seat, he continued, Molly is not in charge of where Harry sleeps, yet she demanded that he be put where he does not want to be. You're being petty, Sirius, Hermione chimed in. Mrs. Weasley is a mother, she would know what children want and need. Harry needs his friends right now, she added. Sirius opened his mouth to snap at her, only to stop when Harry's voice overshadowed his. His godson sounded upset. Oh, now I need my friends. What about when I was waking every night with nightmares of seeing someone, I knew, killed in front of me? By the man who betrayed my parents. Seeing his dead face repeatedly, as he died, and I could do nothing to prevent it. What about the visions that haunt me of the man who was reborn? The man who killed my parents. And now wants to try and kill me, again. What about all the times I was looking over my shoulder, fearing that same man would find me? What about the days when I begged you two to give me some hope with just a bit of information that would help me cope with the fact that I was alone? Where were my friends then? Harry said, starting out slowly and calmly and ending shouting at her. Ron and Hermione listened to their friend in horror. From the looks on their faces, Sirius could tell that they had no idea Harry was going through all that. "Oh my God, Harry, I had no idea," Hermione gasped, and threw herself at her friend and clung to him desperately. "We didn't know. Dumbledore told us you were fine. That you were handling it well. He insisted we didn't write to you about anything. He said you were being told what you needed to know, and that we weren't to tell you more. Oh, Harry, I am so sorry. If I had known I would have done anything to help. You have to believe me," she all but begged, hugging him for all she was worth. "Yeah, mate, we had no clue. I mean, Mum and Dumbledore told us that everything was okay. That you just needed time," Ron added, standing up and going to his friends, putting his hand on Harry's shoulder. "That we should be here for you when you got here." Harry stood stiffly in his friend's embrace. He was angry, and he didn't want to give up on that emotion. It was the only thing that helped in the last few weeks. It kept him from sinking into depression. Still, if what they were saying was true. "Hermione, you are the smartest witch I know. But sometimes you're so stupid. I know you haven't had many friends, but you must have realized that seeing someone killed would have affected me," he said, taking her by the shoulders and gently moving her away. "Dumbledore," she started, only to flinch back at his glare. Dumbledore lied. "I am not cooping. I am not okay, all right? I am not handling it well." "How the hell would he know anyway?" "I've not seen him since I left Hogwarts," Harry yelled, and stomped away from his friends. "Wait, you haven't seen the headmaster since we left?" Ron asked angrily. "He told us that he looked in on you. That someone was always there for you," he snarled in betrayal. "He lied," Harry said bluntly. "Not exactly," Mr. Weasley said cautiously. "There was always someone at number 4 Privet. Dr. Albus made sure that they were there. He didn't want Harry to be kidnapped, so he was protecting him." "That would have been bloody nice to know," Harry snapped, and twirled around to stare at the wall, trying to get his temper under control. "It would have helped immensely to know that there was someone there and that I wasn't abandoned," he whispered softly. His head a mass of emotions, churning in all sorts of different directions. "They didn't tell you?" Ron asked, looking at his father with a hint of anger. "You left him all alone? After he had to deal with the shite that was the tournament? You told me and Hermione that you were handling it." "This is what you call handling it?" he demanded of his father, waving his hand at his overly emotional friend. He had never seen Harry so worked up, not even at school, when all their adventures happen. Harry was always in control of his emotions. "Well, not so much last year, but not like this." "Do not speak to me like that, Ronald," Arthur said firmly, his eyes firm at his son's disrespect. He glanced at his other children and they seemed to feel just as betrayed. He sighed and looked back to Ron. "Dumbledore assured all of us that all was well." Ron just huffed, and sat down, folding his arms in anger. He looked to Harry and could see his shoulders were still tight with anger. He glanced at Sirius, who was walking towards Harry. "Harry," Sirius said, putting a hand on his shoulder to gently turn him around, "they didn't know. Judging from what's being said, you three need to talk. So, take Hermione and Ron to your room and do that. I'll handle things down here," he added, guiding the distraught boy to the door, the other two following along. "All right," Harry said, leaving with his two friends, still stinging over what Mr. Weasley had said. He really didn't like the fact that people were there the whole time he was grieving. That they had seen that, and just let him suffer. He didn't know how he was going to deal with that, but for now he would just have it out with Hermione and Ron. "Fred, George, Ginny," Sirius said after the other three had left, waving to the three who had remained quiet, "why don't you guys let them work it out? Would you go find something to do? I have to talk to your dad." He jerked his head towards the door. "Sure, Sirius," Fred said, taking his sister's elbow and pulling her from the room when it looked like she'd protest. "We'll keep Jinjin company," George added as he followed his brother. "Don't call me Jinjin," they heard her yell as the door closed. "Arthur, you need to talk to your wife. This has got to stop. She needs to understand that she cannot go on acting as she does. I don't even know if the wards will let her back in without an oath that she'll behave," Sirius said as he took a seat behind the desk, picking up his almost empty glass and finishing off the whiskey. Blowing a bit of flame from his mouth. He set the glass down and left it. He was done drinking for now. Though the thought of the Horcruxes made him want to get pissed and not come up for a while. But he had Harry to worry about, so that was out. Arthur sighed and slouched down in the chair in front of the desk. He picked up his discarded glass and sipped, then set it back down again. "I honestly don't know if she could keep that vow," he said, pushing his hand through his balding hair. "What if I restrict her to her room? You can add a privy, and they use the elves for meals, or you can bring her food. I'll relax the wards around the room, and she can stay there until she learns to behave," the weary man said, rubbing his goatee thoughtfully. He knew he had threatened it, but to do it just didn't sit right with him. Too much like Azkaban for his comfort. However, that woman was stressing everyone out and he wasn't going to bow down to her just to relieve that stress. "It won't work," Arthur said, shaking his head. "I know my wife, she'll never back down," he added regretfully. "Then you're just going to have to keep her home. You have a curse breaker for a son, have him put the burrow under a Fidelius," Sirius said firmly. The redhead nodded, thinking about that solution. It might work, he could keep the kids here and take the time to talk to his wife. "I can see that that might work," he conceded with a bit of a nod. "Arthur, I like you, you're a good man, but your wife has made this whole house uncomfortable for everyone. The Order is walking on eggshells, just waiting for her to explode. The kids are hiding in their rooms, for fear of her. It is not fair to anyone to live like this just because she can't behave," Sirius said, feeling the need to explain his actions. I know. I've tried talking to her, but she just won't budge. I'll keep her home, but the burrow is too well known to hide," the other man said sadly, and worriedly. Now that he thought about it, it was true. The burrow was known by everyone he knew and some he didn't know, or even had ever met. It was an object of ridicule, many people had teased him for its eccentricity. It wasn't his fault that he could not get promoted to earn enough to build properly. He was hampered by pure blood prejudice. As long as he was a blood trader, he would be kept in his lowly position. "Have Bill put your basement under. No one will realize that it's gone. A bolt hole if you will, Sirius suggested, thinking furiously. He didn't want the Weasleys to be in danger, but he wasn't going to deal with her anymore. If it weren't for the fact that this house stood alone for years, it would have been impossible to hide it as well. I'll ask him. Can the kids stay here for now? I would feel much better if they could, Mr. Weasley asked in an almost pleading tone. While he loved his wife, the kids' safety came first. They would be protected here, and they would have a better time of it. Sirius was right, Molly was making life uncomfortable for everyone. He, on the other hand, would man up and stay at the burrow. Yes, of course they can. I would never endanger children, even if I don't agree with their parents, Sirius agreed. Besides, it might help Harry to have them around. He had a feeling that the poor man didn't want his wife to take her anger out on her children. Sometimes, Sirius felt that woman was too hard on them. She never really had anything nice to say to the youngest of her boys. She was always weighing them against the oldest three and always found them wanting. It was kind of sad. What about order meetings? The redhead asked. Does she really need to be there? I mean, you can tell her anything that's happening, and she can convey messages through you. That's what Snape has to do. Stupid bastard won't let go of the past, Sirius mumbled the last part to himself. I might offer the burrow for the meetings. We can hold meetings in the basement. That and the kids can't eavesdrop if they are held there, Arthur stated thoughtfully. That might be best. I can fly over when they occur. Still, Molly needs to behave, or I won't come. Someone can keep me informed if it comes to that, the other man stated. It would be different if meetings were held at the burrow, he'd have to be the polite one. He could do it though. Manners had been pounded into his head since he could talk. I will talk this over with Molly, Arthur said, getting out of the chair. We'll discuss it with Dumbledore. He might nix the whole plan. He nodded to Sirius and walked out the door. Yeah, was all Sirius would say as he watched the Weasley patriarch leave. Controlling old coot, he grumbled. He got up and went to the nearest bookshelf and grabbed a book he thought mentioned Horcruxes. He then settled in an armchair and started reading. The Molly problem would just have to wait. HP. Meanwhile, in Harry's room, the three teens sat around the room on chairs and the bed. Harry glared at his friends, though not as fiercely as before. He was starting to understand that they too had been kept in the dark. You truly didn't know what I was going through, he asked them. We really didn't, Ron answered. He lied to us, Hermione said on the verge of tears. He told us you were dealing with it, and that you were never alone. We have to do something about this. It's bullshit, the way we've been treated. Not to mention the way Sirius had been, Harry spat angrily, mostly at people not in the room. The man they all looked up to until a few minutes ago. The woman he thought of as a kind motherly woman, until today. Even when Sirius had told him about her treatment towards the other man, he still held out hope that he was just misreading it all. That was blown out of the water upon his arrival here. Perhaps the bushy-haired girl started, only to taper off when Harry spoke. No, Hermione, Harry said, with a slash of his hand. There is no excuse. You have got to get that through your head. What he did borders on abuse. Abuse of me, abuse of power. The last few weeks have been hell on me. To top it off, I almost died a few hours ago, he added pensively, looking at the floor. What? Both Hermione and Ron exclaimed. Yeah, Dementors tried to suck mine and Dudley's soul out. If Dobby hadn't been there, we'd be dead, Harry said, still glaring at the floor. His thoughts dark as he remembered feeling the cold of those demons. His mum's scream still echoed in his head. That was the something that you told Dad about? Dementors? Ron asked incredulously. He eyes wide with horror. Why Harry, he wondered, thinking hard as to what that could possibly mean. Dementors? In Little Whining? How is that possible? Hermione inquired to no one really, getting a faraway look in her eyes. I think the Ministry is trying to shut Harry up, Ron answered anyway. That was the conclusion he came to. Don't be ridiculous, Ron, she snapped, coming out of her thoughts. No, think about it. They've been putting Harry down all summer. Now, they're trying to do him in, so he can't tell anyone what happened, the redhead insisted. What do you mean, putting me down all summer? Harry asked perplexed. The papers are calling you an unstable, attention-seeking, psychopath, Ron answered, folding his arms across his chest with a disapproving face. What? Why, the boy exclaimed. Fudge reckons you lied. Says that you're trying to get attention. Don't understand that myself. I mean, you won the tourney, why make up stories, his friend stated confused. I'm going to talk to Sirius about this. There has to be something we can do to stop it, Harry said, getting up from the bed and stomping out of the room. At least he's not mad at us anymore, Ron said with a shrug and followed his friend. No, just everyone else, Hermione whispered to herself. Harry stormed down the stairs, his stomps echoing in the stairwell. His anger had returned, and it was palatable. How dare they, he fumed to himself. How dare they make those accusations? After all the crap they put me through, now this. He continued to stamp his way to the study, keeping up his inner dialogue, to where he was sure Sirius still was. He flung open the door, making it bounce off the chair behind it. Sirius startled, but when he saw it was Harry he relaxed. Sirius, are they really calling me an unstable, attention-seeking, psychopath in the paper, he demanded urgently, going into the room and standing in front of his godfather. A desperate look of hope on his face. Like the man could tell him it was all a mistake. Yeah, sorry, they are, the dogman sighed as he put his book on the table next to his chair. He hated seeing Harry's face, and he hated dashing that hope down. He knew that Harry was hoping that they weren't saying things about him. Grown people talking about him like a group of gossiping teenagers, but he wouldn't lie to the boy. Why didn't you tell me? Harry asked, angry that once again he was kept in the dark. He thought that at least Sirius would tell him the whole truth. I really didn't know how much more I could take. Weren't the last 4 years enough? Now, someone is ridiculing me? Just so word that Voldemort is back doesn't get around. Why would they not want that anyway? Do they not care that people were going to get killed? He rambled, throwing his hands in the air while he paced a few steps in 2 directions. I did tell you that you didn't want to know what was in the paper, Sirius said quickly, making Harry stop his pacing. Yeah, you're right, you did say that. Sorry, the tired teen said, slumping in a chair. Harry looked older than he should around the eyes. That poor boy had seen and done things that most adults hadn't, or even could have done. Sirius was determined to give the teen as much of a good life as he could. If he had it his way, Harry would never kill again. It broke his heart to hear the stories of Harry's last 4 years. Too much death for such a young man. I wanted to nip it in the bud if I could. I've already got Andromeda on that, his godfather assured him. Really? You know someone who'll listen? Can she help? The boy asked excitedly. I'm sure she can, Sirius assured him. Wait, who is she? Harry asked as he settled, his brow furrowed as if trying to recall the name. She's my cousin, his godfather replied. You don't know her, but I contacted her last week. Her husband is a solicitor. He's going to have them print retractions and do an article of an overview of your life at Hogwarts. Nothing personal, just the highlights, with a few witness reports. According to Andy, many of your classmates are right upset at the way you're treated. Che, you're right, Harry scoffed, remembering well the ridicule he lived with. He slouched down in his chair. He didn't believe for one moment anyone thought well of him. Sometimes, not even his friends. After Ron's display last year, and Hermione's constant nagging, sometimes it felt as if they were just tagging along, like they had nowhere else to go. He shook those thoughts away. He was letting his anger cloud his judgment. No, really, Sirius insisted, bringing him out of his oppressive thoughts. They just didn't want to come forward for fear that they would be treated the same way. I know for a fact that Andy has talked to quite a few of your classmates. They all have the same thing to say, that you are not an attention-seeking psycho. So, they only think I'm unstable. Harry tried to joke, wondering who the woman had talked to. Maybe Neville? I know you're unstable, Sirius joked back. Seriously though, if Andy and Ted can't get something printed in the Prophet, they're going to sell it to some other publication. Witches Weekly is always looking for good bios on celebrities. That, and if they get WW to run it, the women will be all sympathetic. I'm not sure I want my life displayed like that. Especially, if it promotes pity, Harry said warily, crossing his left leg over his right. I mean, there hasn't been a year gone by that the kids at school haven't vilified me, one way or another. Well, third year wasn't too bad, but they still weren't overly nice. That, and the adults in my life haven't been too helpful either. I remember Sprout cutting me some nasty looks last year. I don't hold much hope of this helping. Still. I get that, but according to Andy, you might just be wrong in how many have your back. Still, if the public realizes just how wrong the Daily Prophet is, then the minister will have a harder time convincing everyone that you're crazy, Sirius said seriously. Yeah, all right, Harry said, thinking maybe it might help. As for the adults in your life, Sirius said, leaning back in his chair, barring Moony, I'll be having words with them. I know why Remus has been remiss in his dealings with you, and we've already had words. I'll let him tell you in his own words. I'm not going to vouch for him or vilify him, just ask that you hear him out, he added. Thinking that maybe he could get some of those adults to understand that listening to Albus about how Harry was supposed to be treated was wrong. He had no proof, but he did have a feeling that the suffering that Harry had done in school was under the orders of Dumbledore. Some bullshit about toughening him up a bit. Well, that was going to stop, if he had his way. After all, he was a deranged psychopath too. Just ask Fudge. That might work, Harry said, thinking it over. I mean, there might be people who I don't know. Now that I think about it, there were a few that gave my sympathy looks. Occasionally. He shrugged his shoulders, and settled further in the chair, a bit excited to see where all this would lead. That, Sirius said, holding up a finger, getting Harry's attention again, and we're hoping you could put in a quote. Nothing too dramatic, just a few words of your deeds, or something, to those that need the extra push. Maybe say something about how you feel about that bloke who died, the dogman said calmly. I don't know about him, and the papers haven't really mentioned him. He was the second part of the duel winners. I feel really bad for his family, the way he's being ignored. He really wanted Harry to do this. The adage, any publicity is good publicity. Even what is being spouted in the papers now, is at least getting people debating. If Harry did this, he would get his side heard, and those debates might turn in his favor. Yeah, maybe. I mean, you're right, what's been done for Cedric? Nothing. He was a good guy, and he really didn't deserve to die like that, Harry whispered more to himself than Sirius. There you go then, just state that and how frustrated you feel over it. I could also say that I'd take a vow that everything I say is true. Heck, they can even dose me with Serum. I mean, I can't stand that people aren't worried. What is it going to take, an all-out war? A genuinely concerned Harry asked. He really hoped it didn't come to that. He was more hoping that Sirius and this order prevented such a thing. Maybe, they did the same last time too. No one wanted to believe that war could happen in their backyard. I didn't, and still don't, and I was there. So, just write up a small something to let them know, okay, the dogman encouraged, giving Harry an adult look that stated he really felt this would help. Okay, I'll write something down, was the sullen reply. Then the teen perked up. Hey, what are you doing about getting free? I mean, if you've got a solicitor, can't he find you an attorney? You could clear your name, Harry asked suddenly, sitting up straight from his slouched position. Well, Ted is talking to a few people, but most lawyers won't take a case they're sure they'll lose. I don't have any evidence, except my memories, and those are not admissible in court. Some stupid law that Dumbledore passed. Around the time of my incarceration, Sirius mumbled thoughtfully, like he just realized this. What? You think he did it on purpose? Harry asked, getting mad again. Now hold on, we don't want to go throwing blind hexes. We have no idea what goes on in the Wizengamot. For all we know, it might be completely unrelated. There were a lot of wealthy purebloods being put on trial then. They could have made something like that past, the Godfather cautioned, though, he too had his doubts. Still, he didn't want Harry to go up against someone as powerful as Dumbledore. He would face that man about his worries. It was his problem, not Harry's. I guess, Harry said mulishly. It was about then that Ron and Hermione came in. Harry wondered what took them so long. Probably arguing. Did you ask about the Dementors? Ron asked, sitting on the sofa, Hermione taking a seat beside him. What about the Dementors? Sirius inquired, both serious and fearful. He had a feeling he would always fear those demons. Ron thinks that the government is trying to kill Harry, Hermione huffed as if she didn't believe it. He might not be wrong, Sirius stated firmly, cutting her a glare. Fudge is a paranoid bastard. He kissed Crouch Jr. just to keep him from talking. He is in complete denial. If he thought killing Harry would make it stop, well, I wouldn't put it past him. Something to inform Ted about. That way if Harry did up and die, then there'd be a record of such a worry. It might be enough to make sure it wasn't swept under the rug. You could be right there, Hermione conceded, nodding her head a bit. You know, I don't understand you sometimes, Hermione, Sirius said, giving her a queer look. You know that I was thrown in prison without a trial. Crouch Jr. was kissed without so much as a by your leave. So, I don't understand why you would even think that the ministry wouldn't try to off Harry, he said with a bit of a bite. He liked Hermione, he really did. She stood by Harry's side all last year, but, and this is a big but, she was condescending to a lot of people. Her friends and him included. If she isn't careful, she could wind up just like Molly. He was determined to prevent that. For Harry's sake. I just don't like to think that the government could, or even would, go out of their way to silence Harry. I mean, you're right, but it's a frightening thought. They are supposed to protect us, not kill us off, she said softly, as if afraid to voice it out loud. I get that, I really do. But isn't it better to know than to live in ignorance? Sirius asked, standing and going to the bookshelf. The teens watched him search, wondering what he was looking for. What are you looking for? Harry asked, voicing their thoughts. Something that might help Hermione realize that those in power have boggarts in their closet, Sirius said, still going over the titles in front of him. He searched around for a moment, and then grabbed one of the tomes. He took it, flipped through a few of the pages, and then closed it. He then returned to his seat. Hermione harumphed, folding her arms in frustration. I do know that already, she said, glaring at the older man. Maybe, but you still think that they are a higher authority, therefore untouchable, or something, the older man said, thumbing through the book again. But with this, you might just see that they are human. What is it? Harry asked, looking at the dark leather book. Blackmail, was the answer. Then Sirius returned his look to Harry's female friend. Now my family was dark, I'll admit that. However, they were also a paranoid bunch. My Aunt Kalidora has dirt on everyone in the Wizengamot and quite a few in the ministry. This book is a composite of what she gathered before she got too old to use it. She wrote this so that the family would have a record, he said, closing the book again. Hermione eyed the book with both a bit of greed and trepidation. Her hands flinched a little, like she was trying not to grab the book and start reading it. Sirius chuckled at her look and aborted movements. Remus acted much like that when he teased him with knowledge. I think you'll find there are a lot of skeletons in many closets. Better not eat first. And I wouldn't recommend it for bedtime reading, he said, leaned over the coffee table, and handing her a dark reed leather-bound book. Oh, thank you, Sirius, she gushed like she hadn't just been mad at him, taking the book lovingly as if cradling a treasure. Her fingers danced across the cover, which was gold embossed with a skeletal, winged horse. You won't thank me when you've read it, the man said, sitting back in his chair. Mark my words. Why are you acting as if he gave you gold? Ron asked, very confused. Didn't you hear what he said? Harry felt the same way. That book was a work of nightmares. Its history, was her reply as she still admired the cover. Straight from someone's thoughts and hard work, all put onto paper, she added, cracking the cover gently. Only the Black family has read it. It's a great honor to be trusted with it. Well, don't tell me about any of it, unless we can use something to help Harry and Sirius, the redhead said, leaning back a bit in his chair. Like getting away from that knowledge was the best idea he had all evening. I really hope she finds something good, mate, he added, looking at Harry. Harry pretty much wished for the same thing. If that book held the key to Sirius' freedom, hell, he'd read it. Me too, he almost whispered. If you do, Sirius said, let me know and I'll see if I can't find proof. I'm not above blackmail to get what I want. Sirius, really, Hermione chastised, gently closing the book and laying it in her lap. It would really help, Harry stated, giving his friend a cutting look. Fine, she huffed. If I find anything, I will let someone know. No, you'll let Sirius know. It's his book, Harry stated, waving to the nodding man. Just then Sirius' head shot up. Oh, looks like Dumbledore is here, he claimed with a chuckle. What's so funny? Harry asked, not seeing what could possibly be good about that. The wards are giving him a hard time again. They did the same last week too. But now it appears that they are making him work to get in. Sirius laughed, just picturing the look on the old man's face when he bounced off. He has ill intent? Harry asked warily and a bit disbelievingly. Nah, just control issues, his godfather stated, waving the thought off. Oh, so they let him in then, the teen asked, looking at his friends to see what they were feeling. Hermione had folded her hands over the book, and turned towards the door, as if waiting for the headmaster to come in and explain himself. There was a determined look on her face, like she would strangle the old man for answers. Ron was slipping down his chair, as if to avoid confrontation. His eyes were darting around the room, like he was noting good hiding spaces, or exits. Harry didn't blame him. According to Sirius, there had been too many fights this week as it was. Dumbledore came through the door a few moments later, looking a bit ruffled. His purple and pink robes were in disarray, and his beard looked like it needed a good combing. He peered over his glasses at the children, dismissed them, though he did raise an eyebrow about Harry's presence, and then he glared at Sirius. "Children," he started in a firm voice, "you need to remove yourselves from the room. I need to talk to Sirius." It was a demand. "Harry, why don't you take these two up to your room and let them know what I've done so far?" Sirius requested, not taking his eyes off the headmaster. "All right, Sirius, but only because you asked," Harry said, getting up from the chair, his eyes also glued to Dumbledore. "Harry." Hermione started, only for Ron to grab her elbow and pull her from the room. "Don't," the redhead said, dragging her along. "Just don't." But was all she got out when she noted Harry glaring at her. She closed her mouth, yanked her arm from Ron's grip, held the book close to her chest, and stomped up the stairs. "She's going to be a nightmare," Ron commented as he walked up to stand next to Harry, who was glancing at the door of the study. "Isn't she always?" came the quiet reply. Then the dark-haired teen sighed and started slowly going up the stairs. "Don't worry, we'll talk her around," he added, hoping it was true. Back in the study, Sirius was still staring at the headmaster. "Take a seat, Albus," he said, waving to the chair Harry just vacated. "I'd offer refreshments, but you don't seem to be here for pleasantries." Dumbledore looked at the chair and sighed. He walked over and slowly sat down, as if his old bones were achy and tired. "Why did you remove Molly from the house?" he asked as he settled. "She is an important member of the Order. You see, what I don't understand is why everyone is making me out to be the bad guy. I opened my home to people I don't know. However, I am ridiculed, chastised, and generally treated bad by everyone," Sirius said, waving away Albus' attempt at rebuttal. "Don't try and justify their actions. Molly Weasley came here with the intent that I was a horrible person, even after I gave her family a safe haven. And now, you're coming in here telling me I was wrong. Damn it, Dumbledore, the wards would not have booted her if she had just shut her damn mouth," he stated firmly, glaring at the old man. "Now, Sirius, I believe you are overreacting," the old man said anyway. "No, I'm not. I am an innocent man, being held in a house I hate. I should at least feel somewhat safe and comfortable here. You would think that all the adults in this house believe that I am a criminal with the way they look and talk about me. I mean, hell, even Mundungus and Snape are treated better than me." "One's a thief and the other's a Death Eater," the innocent man exclaimed, throwing his hands in the air in exasperation. "Both of those men are going dangerous tasks for the Order. You, unfortunately, cannot," the old man sighed. "Yeah, about that. Why have you done nothing to get my name cleared? Can't you call for a trial? Sirius all but growled. The system does not work like that, my dear boy. I can ask, but I fear that nothing will come of it. Moreover, with my name being, as they say, in the mud, I hold little influence over the Wizengamot, Albus explained, a soulful look in his eyes, as if pleading to be believed. I can see that might be true now, but not a year ago, the dogman said, not going for the manipulation. The headmaster's face sobered, and he sat to his fullest height. Are you accusing me of something? He inquired forcefully. Yes, was the blunt returner. I think you don't want me to take Harry, Sirius added. See, you could have given me a trial back in 81. You didn't. You vouched for Snape, of all people, but I wasn't even given the common courtesy of a trial. And you could have done something last year, when people still adored you. Speaking of young Harry, why is he here? Albus asked, only to have the question ignored. Why didn't you get me a trial? Sirius insisted on knowing. He wasn't going to tell the old man anything about Harry. I must insist that you tell me why the boy is here, the headmaster stated, doing his best grandfather routine. No, was all the answer he got. Getting back to the matter at hand, Sirius said, softly. I think, that when you heard that Harry wanted to live with me, you just put it off. I think that you left me hanging in 81, just so you would get your way with Harry's living arrangements. Well, that stops now. I'm not going to stay on the run the rest of my life. I'm going to do everything I can to get cleared, and if I step on your toes to do it, I will, he stated, slamming his fist on the arm of his chair, all but yelling the last part. I see, was all the old man said, stroking his beard, deep in thought. This did not bode well for him. If Sirius did get free, then he would have say over Harry. Those blood wards would be for naught. He would have to reason with the man. Harry was invisible to his enemies under those wards. If they fell, then the Dursleys would be in danger. I can see that machine you call a brain is working overtime to try and control the situation. I tell you here and now, I'm going to do everything in my power not to let that happen, the other man cautioned. Back to Molly, why did you remove her from the house? The headmaster asked again. I didn't, and don't think for a moment you're changing the subject is going to change my mind, the younger man stated. If you did not remove her, then why did she inform me that you had? I told you, the wards did. She went too far, they just picked her up and carried her out, the younger man lied, straight to the venerable man's face. I see, Albus said, his face taking a sour look. He remembered that just tonight he had to fight the wards. Perhaps, Sirius was telling the truth. Molly was a strong-minded person. Plus, she did hold Sirius in contempt. I've talked to Arthur, he's going to keep her at the Burrow, and he wants to talk to you about alternate plans, Sirius stated, settling back in his chair with narrow eyes. He still didn't trust the man in front of him, and the more he thought about the years past, his and Harry's, the more that distrust grew. I can see I will get nowhere with you tonight, Albus said, getting slowly up from the chair. And once again, it is my fault, the dogman sighed. I will bid you good night and hope that we can reach an agreement shortly. With that the old man started from the room. You know, I think you're going to need a bit of a push, Sirius said thoughtfully, rubbing his chin. He got up as if to escort the older man out of his house. Whatever do you mean? Dumbledore asked, turning slightly to look at the younger man, not liking the look in his eyes. He fingered his wand, hoping the man didn't do anything foolish. I hereby revoke the secret of Grimmauld Place from Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, plus all those that are members of his Order of the Phoenix. May they know it no more, Sirius incanted with a deep voice and distrusting eyes. With those words, Dumbledore disappeared. He would no longer know where this house was, nor would anyone in the Order. This way they had to find somewhere else. Anyone in the house would be fine. They weren't part of the Order, just related to members. Still, now he was going to have to tell some people where he was. He needed to have some support through all of this. Sirius heaved a great sigh of relief, and he sat back on his chair and shook his head. He sighed again and picked his discarded book back up and began to read. He'd write those that needed to know later. Right now, he needed to find a way to get that damned Horcrux out of Harry's head. He was sure that was what it was, though he was fighting hard against the river of denial. Harry first, others second. Harry was more important. While Harry and Ron were going up the stairs to join Hermione, Harry was thinking about what he would write. He thought instead of writing about himself, he'd do a type of eulogy on Cedric, like Sirius suggested. He would tell of how great of a guy the teen was and how he didn't deserve to be forgotten by the public. How he lived, what a great seeker he was, how good he did in the tournament, and how he died. Hopefully, that might be enough for people to remember the first casualty of this, so far, silent war. If they could just realize that Cedric's death meant something, he'd be happier. What are you think of so hard? Ways to get Hermione to see our point? Ron asked, in a desperate jest. No, something else. However, we do need to suss out what to say to her. I mean, she's a bit hard-headed about some stuff, Harry replied, shaking his thoughts on Cedric's death to the side for a moment. I think we should be brutally honest, the redhead stated, shoving his hands in his pocket as they topped the stairs. It's the only way she'll listen. We can't pussyfoot around it. She needs to understand that she's not right about this. We can't back down like we did with SPEW. Yeah, was all Harry said as they came to the door to his room. Hermione was a great friend, and he loved her dearly, but sometimes. They opened the door and went inside. The room was still green and a bit dark. Hermione was sitting on a chair reading the book Sirius gave her, a look of horrified distaste on her face. She heard them come in and slammed the book shut as if it would take away the horror she just read. Though Sirius suggested you not read that at night, Harry said bluntly as he came in and closed the door. He headed to the only other chair in the room. I guess I didn't believe him, she whispered, a bit of whimper in her voice, probably from what she just read. Put it away, yeah, Ron suggested, kicking off his shoes and sitting on the bed, one leg up and the other swinging off the side. She did without comment, but with a look of relief, and took a few deep breaths and sighed. She dropped her hands to her lap and lifted her chin, as if preparing for a fight. She knew the boys didn't agree with her on many things, but usually she could talk them around. However, Harry was still very angry over how many treated him this summer, herself included, so she was bracing herself for that. Hermione, you shouldn't chastise Sirius the way you do. It's what got Mum kicked out of the house. I know you said your parents are out of the country, so you have nowhere to go if you get booted, Ron said, starting what he felt was going to be a rough conversation. I, for one, don't want to see you on the streets, Harry added, keeping his voice calm. He's talking of blackmailing people. Not only is that illegal, it is morally repugnant, she stated defensively. Her arms folded across her chest and her nose lifted in an offended air. Wait, didn't you blackmail Skeeter? Harry asked, a bit confused. That's different, I'm not making her do anything illegal, she sniffed, shoulders tight with tension. No, but still it's blackmail, Ron added his thoughts. What I've read of this book is not just something that can be taken lightly. If Skeeter messes up, her whole life won't be over. She would just have to pay the fine, Hermione insisted, sticking to her virtues. Skeeter was only annoying, Sirius was talking about blackmailing government officials. It was completely different. No, there's a prison sentence with that, Ron rebutted, scooting closer to the edge of the bed. Besides, no one will listen to me anyway, my threats to her are hot air, the bushy-haired girl stated. What Sirius is thinking is immoral, she huffed, folding her arms and sitting back in her chair. Yeah, but he's an adult and rich. If he can get his names cleared, I say let him. I don't care if it's immoral, or illegal, Harry said a bit in his tone. Besides, you don't treat other adults that way. So why Sirius? He asked, leaning forward a bit as if to say listen to me. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't treat Sirius different, she said, though a look of guilt crossed her face. Yeah, you do, Ron argued, his brow furrowed thinking maybe she truly believed what she was saying. Yeah, Ron's right. Sirius and I have kept in contact this last week, and he said, you pretty much just blow him off. It's like you have no respect for him at all. What has he done to offend you, that others have not? Harry added, really wanting to know. As far as he knew, Sirius had only been kind and helpful to the teens. He hasn't done anything to offend me, besides owning house elves. It's just I don't know, she admitted reluctantly. There's just something about his personality that makes me just want to correct him all the time. It's a bit like he never grew up and is now pretending to be a man, she confessed in a soft voice. She wasn't sure herself why her reactions to Sirius were so blasé. He was a nice man, and funny. He was letting her and the Weasleys stay here. That, and he really helped Harry, and was there for him, and she was grateful for that. Merlin knows the boy needed an adult to stand up for him. However, there was just something that made her want to dismiss Sirius as unimportant. I think you're letting Mrs. Weasley do your thinking there, Harry said, tapping his chin with his finger. How do you figure that? She asked, taking a good look at her actions. Think about what you just did, Harry said, waving to the book in her lap. You read a book he suggested you not read before bedtime. Here it is, going on 9, and you were reading it? Hermione, you are going to have to do some serious thinking. He peered at her through his bangs, keeping his head down so she wouldn't see just how angry he was. In his eyes, it really wasn't her fault, she was raised to respect authority, but... Yeah, take my word for it, you keep going like you are, and you're going to wind up as bad as Mum, Ron added desperately as if hoping that she took his words to heart and changed her ways. Ron, don't talk about your mum that way, she said aghast, putting her hand to heart as if deeply affronted for Mrs. Weasley. See, that right there is what we're talking about. You are making demands like you're our mum. Hermione, it's his mum, if he wants to acknowledge that she's pushy, it is his right, Harry exclaimed, pointing his finger at her accusingly. He shouldn't talk about her so horridly, she huffed, thumping back in her chair. It's not your right to correct him, he snapped back. You are not his sister, or mother, or related in any way. You are not his girlfriend, wife, or lover, he added, making both the teens blush and look at each other, only to look away. Ron mumbled. You're his friends, Harry continued, ignoring their byplay, and while that does mean you can have your own opinion, it doesn't mean you can correct him. Instead you should have said, something along the lines that you don't agree, he stated firmly. He really hoped that they could talk her around. He liked Hermione. She was always there for him. However, he could do without a big sister and would love to have a good friend. "Aren't you demanding that I change my ways?" she asked, not really believing that, but wanting to get the point across that he was being forceful right now. "You're right, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be so pushy. However, like I said, I like you. Ron likes you. I just want you to understand that you can come off as bossy. Overbearingly so. The only reason I'm being so blunt is because you've not listened to me in the past. That, and we want you have other friends as well. So far you have not endeared yourself to anyone else. I mean, do you get along with others in Gryffindor?" Harry asked, hoping that he wasn't being too much of an arse. "Well, no. Not really," she answered, trailing off in thought. She had a hard time associating with the other girls. They came off as a bit vapid, flighty, and not at all like they enjoyed school. She was a die-hard bibliophile, and she took her studies seriously. She liked Neville well enough, but he was a painfully shy boy. Still, she did consider him a friend. She was also on good terms with Ginny, and the twins. "Ginny, Neville, and the twins," she said, hoping that that would make them see that others liked her. "I can tell you that my siblings think you're all right, bossy, but all right," Ron said, nodding his head to Harry that it was true. "Neville has confided in me that he thinks you're scary, not Snape scary, but still," Harry said, tapping his chin again. "Really? I didn't know that," she said, a bit downhearted. "He likes you well enough, but like I've been trying to say, he thinks you're too pushy," Harry stated, trying not to come off as an arse. "Yeah, Hermione, I get that we will disagree, but one overbearing woman in my life is enough, thanks," Ron added, his 2 newts worth, the blush fading from his face. "You think I'm overbearing?" she asked in a small voice. "Yes," they both said, one kindly, the other firmly. "Yes," Harry said again, softer this time. "I hate to say this, because I do love you as a friend, but everyone we've ever spoken to, even those we've just mentioned, has asked us how we put up with your condescending ways." "Right, Ron?" he asked, turning to his friend. "He's right, Hermione. I told you this in first year. Remember, it's what got you stuck in the bathroom with the troll. I know you were just trying to help, and I went about it all wrong, and I apologize for that, but we both could have handled that differently." "Where no one would have left upset or angry," the redhead said, leaning forward a bit. "We're not 11 anymore. We should be more mature about things." "We're only trying to help," Harry added quickly. "Maybe you're right," she said slowly, still thinking that she messed up somewhere if they, and everyone else it seemed, thought she was overbearing. She never knew they thought that. All she ever wanted was for them to succeed in life. She just knew that they were a lot smarter than they let on, and it miffed her that they didn't push themselves to their full potential. But if they were seeing her a bossy, then she was doing the right thing the wrong way. "Then the whole thing about house elves," Harry added, wanting to make a point, making her pay attention. She opened her mouth to argue, but he raised his hand to stop her. "You found out about them and then bam. There was suddenly a crusade to free them," he stated, making and blowing up motion with his hands. "You came to us and demanded that we be part of it?" "Hermione, we didn't want to. Ron thought you were straight up barmy, and I didn't know enough about them to form an opinion. Now that you've hopefully talked to the ones here, I'm sure you understand that what you were trying to do was wrong." He held her gaze to make sure that she was listening. "No, you're right, I have talked to them and they are happy the way they are. I think I'll try for better treatment of them instead, she said thoughtfully, her face then fell a bit. I guess I can be overly ambitious. I am only trying to make you as far as she got. No, don't you see, you can't make us do anything, Harry interrupted softly. He didn't want to make it seem that he was telling her she was a bad person, just a bit. Well, he hoped she was listening. You can't make us behave. You can't make us do our homework. You can't make us join your crusades. It's not your place. You can suggest, you can bribe, you can even simply ask. However, you can't force us. You are going to have to accept that we can say no to you. Yeah, Harry says no to me all the time. The only person who can demand things of me is my mum, well, Dad too, Ron added, nodding his head in agreement. And for me it's my relatives, though I still tell them no all the time. I don't respect them. I do however respect you. But, that's not my point, he said, waving away the questions he could see forming. They knew his life, he didn't need to repeat it. My point is, you are not our mum. You're our friend, Harry corrected. He put his hand on her knee and gave a squeeze to show he did care but meant every word. What about Dumbledore? She tried to rally. That is completely different. He is in charge of the school we go to. That's it? He isn't family either. So, you don't have that to fall back on, Ron stated, looking at Harry for confirmation. And I'm sorry, Harry, I shouldn't have listened him, but Mum. I get that, I really do, but, well, we'll talk about that later. How about it, Hermione, work with us here, Harry said, giving her an encouraging smile. I'll try, she promised. I'll try to be more of a friend and less of a mum. She grabbed his hand and reached for Ron's, who stood up and took it, making the other two to stand, so that they all faced each other. Friends, I think I'd like that. Friends, the boys said, and they all fell into a group hug. Things were going to be okay. HP. Meanwhile, Sirius remembered that Arthur might want to remember where his kids were. Well, Molly too, but he wasn't going to tell her. Arthur could come and see for himself they were fine or take them home if he felt the need. Getting up, he went straight to the flue and called the man, and it was a good thing too. Arthur and his wife were completely worried that they had forgotten where their kids were. They knew they were with Sirius, and that bugged Molly, but they couldn't remember the address. He went through the flue, after being invited, to give Arthur the address. Arthur, he said, ignoring the glares Molly was giving him. He handed the address to the man, and then when he was sure he had it, he snatched it back. You can come by every day to check on the kids, he said, still ignoring the fuming woman. Are you okay there by yourself? The redhead asked, glancing at his wife. I mean, my children can be quite a handful, he added. I'll ask someone to come and help with them. I have a few females in the family that can do that, Sirius stated, already thinking on who he was going to write. He hoped that would placate the kid's mom. She did deflate a bit, but still glared at him. He didn't want anything to come back and bite him. Like have underage girls in his house without chaperone. He was trying to get his name cleared, not muddy it up again. Perhaps, Andy or Tonks could stay for a few weeks. I keep in touch every day, or you can have one of the twins call me and let me know everything is okay. Thanks for keeping an eye on them, Arthur said, putting his hand on Sirius' shoulder. Tell the twins that I'll be home after 6 every evening, he asked, glaring at Molly to keep her quiet. Or they can report to Molly. She's agreed that the children are best left under the Fidelius, he added, standing back and putting an arm around his wife. Whether to comfort her or hold her back, Sirius didn't know. Sure, not a problem, the dogman said, nodding to Molly and fleeing home. He decided to write Ted about the Dementors, just so there'd be a written history of it. There was no proof they could take anywhere, but he was going to make sure Harry recorded everything he felt was an attempt on his life. Remus would get a letter telling him to meet him tomorrow afternoon, so he could share the secret. He wanted his friend here to help with the kids and to keep track of any repercussions Dumbledore might do. He knew Albus was going to do everything in his power to get Harry back. Speaking of which, he needed to add to Ted's letter that Harry was not kidnapped but rescued. Maybe he'd get the man to investigate the Dursleys, that way there would be a paper trail on the abuse. Still, he wouldn't put it past Dumbledore to make such accusations. He needed to nip that in the bud, fast. With those thoughts in mind, he took himself to a desk and started writing to the people who he felt needed to know. Halfway through Ted's letter he got up and flew to the Tonks house. He held a quick conversation with both Ted and Andy and arrangements were made. Remus, he would still write. After he finished Oling Remus' letter, he decided to check on the kids. They would need to head to bed soon. He went up the stairs, still marveling on how clean they were. It was a breath of freshness that made him feel like the house was more a home than it had ever been. He reached his destination and knocked. Harry popped his head out and smiled when he saw who was there. "Sirius, what's up?" he asked, opening the door all the way and letting his godfather in. "Just checking on you guys. I didn't hear any yelling, so I figured you were okay." "Work everything out, did you?" the dogman asked, settling on the bed next to Ron, who swung his legs off to make room. "Yeah, it's a work in progress, but I feel we'll be just fine," Harry answered, retaking his seat. Hermione blushed. She knew that it was going to take a lot of discipline on her part, so she spoke to the man she wronged. "I'm going to work harder on being a friend," she said firmly with a decisive nod. "The boys pointed out that I was turning into Mrs. Weasley, and while I feel she is right about some things, she is a bit of a shrew," she added, glancing at Ron to see if he was going to get angry. "Don't look at me," the boy said, holding his hands in the air. "I have always felt that way. She's my mum, and I love her, but her voice could break glass once she gets going." Everyone chuckled and nodded. "Well, I'm glad you worked it out. I like you, Hermione. You're a great friend to Harry, but if you had been older, I would have made you leave days ago," Sirius said, seriously, his eyes narrowed a bit in that adult way that meant business. "I know," she said softly. "I want to apologize, I have been letting the other adults dictate how I react to you." "And I'm sorry," she said, looking at his face with wide eyes. "I sorta guessed that's what was happening, so I let it slide. However, you need to start respecting me a bit. Just from the way you act towards others, I know your mum taught you manners," the older man stated, looking at the girl in slight reprimand. "Speaking of your mum, do you want to go to a payphone and call them? Make sure they are okay," he asked, thinking of all the letters that never left the house. "Oh, didn't I tell you? They're overseas this summer. I was supposed to go with them, but then Mrs. Weasley showed up and told them I might be in danger. She didn't even wait for them to say it was okay. She just packed my stuff and told them I would be safe. Which, by the way, I don't appreciate," she said, looking at Ron, who held his hands up again. The three men in the room shared looks. They felt bad for her, that Mrs. Weasley was so heavy-handed to the girl's parents. "Sorry," Ron mumbled, feeling the need to apologize to her. "It's not your fault, Ron," but I appreciate the gesture. Anyway, like I said, she told them I'd be safer here. They told me, before I left, that they couldn't change plans, and that they would see me next summer, she finished, hanging her head a bit as if upset that she was denied a fun summer with her parents. Oh, okay. I'm glad to hear that. I tried to write them but was denied by the order. I'm glad they are safely out of the country. You should write them and see if they can extend their vacation until this whole business is over, Sirius suggested, hoping that they Grangers did just that. I will. I'll have to tell them something, probably the truth, but I will warn them, the bushy-haired girl replied, already thinking about what she needed to write. What happened with Dumbledore? Ron asked, changing the subject, turning and facing Harry's godfather. I made him leave, was the only answer that Sirius gave. Why? Hermione asked, more of an inquiry than a demand for answers. She was still upset about how he lied about Harry. How he had told her, and Ron, that Harry was okay, when obviously he wasn't. He wanted to take control. Kept demanding that I let people I don't like in my house. I took exception, Sirius stated, as if it were a foregone conclusion to begin with. Oh, was all she said, though her face took a thoughtful look. Why don't you guys head to bed? I'm going to check on the rest of the Weasleys. I've asked for either Andy or Tonks to come and play chaperone. So, that the girls will have a female about. I would have asked your parents, Hermione, but you said they were on holiday, Sirius said, standing and giving Ron room to get by him. The room wasn't small, but it was cramped with furniture. Oh, I like Tonks, Hermione stated, getting up herself. Who's Tonks? Harry asked as he watched everyone get ready to leave. Ron picked up his shoes and decided to carry them. He was only going down one floor. He was glad he had a room to himself. He spent enough time with roommates at school. He shrugged in answer to Harry's question, and looked at Sirius. Andy's daughter, Sirius answered. She doesn't like her first name, and prefers to be called Tonks, which is their last name. He escorted the other two teens to the door. Oh, okay, I'll keep that in mind. Night, all, Harry called as they left. Night, Harry, came the reply of the other three. With that the door closed and Harry for the first time, since he got there, was alone with his thoughts. It had been a hard night, but a lot had been done. So, he, for one, was glad that Sirius brought him here. He settled at the desk on the far wall and started to write the eulogy. He made sure to keep it about Cedric, and the injustice of his death. He didn't state anything about Voldemort, he knew that would distract from his point. He only told of how they were kidnapped during the final task and how the boy was cut down without warning. It was unfair that he was thought of as a spare. He stated that the kidnappers were after him and because Harry tried to be fair, Cedric died. He made sure to add how sad that made him feel. Tears were pouring down his face when he finished, but he finally felt a sense of closure. Like Cedric could finally rest in peace. He folded the letter and placed it on the desk, leaving the tear marks, and settled into the amazingly comfortable bed. Sleep, for the first time in ages, came to him quickly and his dreams were not bad. Harry's heart was calm, and he felt, for the first time since he found out he was a wizard, that the world didn't rest on his shoulders. That's a lot of first times for one night, but they were all warranted. He loved that Sirius could make him feel good about himself. Either by just being there, or by suggesting things that helped. Hope you enjoyed this part.